Okay, welcome back, guys. I wanted to talk a little bit about men and their experience of emotions today. And before I do that, I'll share a personal story. So, when I was in university, I had a friend, still my very good friend till today, and he had a girlfriend. So, I went to the school in Nigeria that had sort of the housing for boys and had the housing for girls, and it was separate and it was far. So he had a girlfriend and he walked all the way from the boys' accommodation to go see his girlfriend where she was. And they had a fight. And so when he got there, she refused to open the door for him. And he pleaded, he begged, and she didn't listen. So he had to come back. So when he came back, I found that I was more upset about what his girlfriend did than he was. I felt so hurt for him. You know, I was like, what? I think I was like 19. I was thinking, how is it that she's so upset with you that she can't care for you? She couldn't open the door for you to take a piss, to get some water, give you food, right? Like she was so upset and she was watching you out the door. And, he just said, it's women, it's fine. Like, I'll talk to her. I'll deal with it. And I couldn't let it go. I mean, you can see that it still sticks with me till today. And the reason I'm talking about it right now is because I have found over the years that when I have had painful emotional experiences and I've shared it with other men, it's been very hard for me to connect with them over that pain because I think they don't experience it as painful as I do. And so that's been something that's been really interesting to me. And I think what I've found in the last couple of years is that the ability of those men to be able to not be as affected about things as I am actually is a superpower in a sense. And I'll explain. I think that it allows them to stay in uncomfortable situations that I, for example, would not be able to stay in. There's sometimes where I watch movies and, especially movies that depict the past. And you see people are so brave, they run into dangerous situations. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, that would never be me, right? Like I watch movies sometimes and I get scared, even though I'm here sitting in the world and I know that that's a movie. I'm afraid for the person and I'm wondering, why the hell are they doing that? And so I think today I wanted to talk a little bit about how I think men came to be this way and how maybe that understanding can help us to, as men especially, to have empathy for ourselves and the ways that we are in the world and maybe to see the gap that needs to be addressed so that we can have healthier human relationships. So I guess I'm saying that I think that at some point in our history, men needed to disconnect from their feelings. I think that many of the situations that we found ourselves in, that our ancestors found themselves in, needed the men to act in certain ways. And those ways needed the men to disconnect from their emotions. So we're talking about protection of communities. We're talking about fighting wars. We're talking about hunting. We're talking about enforcing the law. We're talking about defending your land and your resources and your family. I think that these roles required being able to suppress your fear, being able to suppress your anxiety, so that you can act under threat, make split-second decisions, and protect those that you care about. I mean, and when you were doing that, you also got to witness a lot of violence and suffering. And sometimes maybe it was you who got to inflict that violence and suffering. And then you had to go back home to your family and continue to function. I don't think that that's something that human beings are able to do so effectively without having to shut themselves down emotionally on some level. And so I think men learned very early that feeling things too much will make them not as effective as they'd like to be at doing the job that was required of a man at that time. And to me, that's not a pathology, that's an adaptation. And so I think over time, and especially when you think about, the inheritance of some of these things and how they are passed over through the DNA, I think over time, this became a really great skill that men learned to compartmentalize, to push their feelings aside, to stay task focused, to prioritize action over reflection, to move forward and act without processing. And those men were often praised. And I think in society, many of those men are the ones who become powerful and really successful because there's a certain level of determination and progress that I think you can make in today's society if you can do that. These men are seen as strong, reliable, capable, dependable under pressure, right? And I think for many men, our nervous system learned this is what masculinity is. This is how I stay valuable. Now, here's what I think really matters. Men learned how to turn their emotions off, but they never learned to turn them back on, right? There was no training for processing fear after danger has passed. There was no training for grieving after loss. I mean, how many videos have we seen and movies that we've watched where someone has died? You know, I remember watching a movie the other day and a father had lost his son and he heard about it and he was driving to the scene of the loss or the accident. And he ran there and immediately he ran there and he saw the accident and how the son looked. He ran back to prevent his wife from coming to see it. And he held her and just provided that presence and that safety. And he's like, no, you can't go. You can't go. And he was hurting too. So men never learned these things. They didn't learn to name emotions or to re-enter emotional connection after that disconnection. So I think most men, not all men, stayed shut down. And over generations, I think it became normalized. So fast forward to our generation, right? Most men are no longer hunting. Some men still do. Most men are not engaged in fighting daily wars like we used to. And not many men are engaged in defending their land with weapons, even though sadly it's still happening in a lot of places. But I think for the most part, that emotional strategy that men learned, it's showing up in their relationships today. So we're finding that men really struggle. And again, not all men, most men, they're struggling to name their feelings. They shut down during conflicts. They go numb when emotions come up. They feel overwhelmed whenever they see emotional intensity from their woman. And they avoid vulnerability and they can't even explain it. I don't think it's because they don't care. I think it's because their nervous system just has a way of being. And that way of being is emotional exposure is dangerous. I think for many men, if you talk to them, there's a vague sense of emptiness on the inside. There's a difficulty with accessing real joy. There's a restlessness. There's anger and irritability has replaced sadness. They're struggling with connecting with themselves, and therefore they are struggling with connecting with their partners. And so I think it's this reality where modern relationships are asking men to do something that's absolutely foreign and new. Modern relationships are asking men to be emotionally present, to connect to their feelings and talk about them, to stay open during conflict, to co-regulate with their partners instead of withdraw. But not many of them know how. And so the partners are saying, why won't you open up? Why do you shut down? And I think what many men tend to hear from that is, the way you survived is wrong. The way you are is wrong. And I think that creates shame and it deepens the disconnection. So, well, if you're a man listening to this, I think the message is you're not broken. You have adapted to become really good at doing something that's potentially no longer needed today. I think men need to know that based on where we're coming from, the way that they are now makes sense. But it doesn't have to be permanent. Emotional capacity can be learned. Connection can be rebuilt. But it has to be done slowly and safely without humiliation. So, as a man, once you recognize this gap in your life, your job then becomes to begin to work on this, on learning these skills. This is where your therapist comes in. You need to begin to teach your nervous system to reconnect with those feelings that you have had to disconnect from for the longest time. And I think that men also need to be in relationships with women who are not going to do the work for you, not going to do the emotional labor for you, but women that have an empathy and have an understanding of why men are this way and they can create that safe space for the man to begin to reconnect with himself, if you are one of those that this video connects with. So I don't think that I'm saying men need to be less strong. I think it's just about redefining strength. I think our strength needs to move from the place of physical and financial. Not move from. I think men still need to be physically strong. I think men still need to be financially strong. But now we also need to improve our emotional range and also become emotionally strong. We need to cultivate the ability to be present and not disconnect, because our adaptation to disconnection needs to evolve. And yeah, those are my thoughts. I wonder what you guys think about this. Let me know in the comments.